Blood ran down her leg, mixing with the dust. The summer heat in Red Hollow was brutal, the kind that cracked the ground and cooked a man's thoughts. Leah Jennings stumbled across the dry plain barefoot, her clothes torn to pieces. Every step left a mark of pain behind her. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Her body was covered in bruises, her breath short and broken. The sun burned her shoulders, and the wind carried the sound of her fear. Somewhere behind her, she thought she could still hear laughter, cruel laughter that follows you out of hell. When she reached the edge of a ranch, her knees gave out and she fell hard into the dirt. The world spun, blurred, and then stopped when she heard the sound of boots. Samuel Briggs stepped out from the shadow of his barn. 56 years old, beard gray at the chin, eyes sharp as a hawk, a man shaped by the land itself. He hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, but what he saw lying in front of him stopped his breath cold. The girl was a wreck. Dust clung to her skin, her hair stuck to her face, and tears had carved lines through the grime. Her voice cracked when she tried to speak. "Please," she whispered, her hands trembling as she clutched what was left of her torn clothes. I need to take it off." "Please help me." Samuel froze. He had seen wounded men, dying horses, even friends shot dead right in front of him. But this was different. This was what a broken soul looked like. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a low, steady voice, he said, "Come inside." Leah struggled to her feet and followed him into the small cabin. It smelled of coffee, tobacco, and old wood. Samuel poured water into a basin, grabbed a clean rag and a bottle of whiskey. The air filled with the sharp scent of alcohol and blood. He cleaned her wounds carefully and slow. The girl didn't cry. She only bit her lip and stared at the floor, silent and shaking. When he asked her name, she whispered it softly. Samuel nodded without a word. He had questions, but he knew the answers would hurt to hear. Outside, the wind picked up, moaning through the fence line. Inside, only the ticking of a clock broke the silence. Samuel looked at her again. Something about the girl reminded him of someone, his sister Mary. She had been 16 when soldiers came through the valley. He'd been away that night buying cattle. By the time he came back, she was gone. That guilt had lived inside him ever since. Now, looking at this broken girl sitting in front of him, Samuel felt something old stir inside, anger, grief, and helplessness. But this time he wasn't going to walk away. "Drink this," he said, handing her a glass. Leah took it, her hands trembling. She looked up at him, her eyes red but steady. "Are you going to send me away?" she asked quietly. Samuel didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the endless land under the burning sun, then back at her. "No," he said. "You're safe here." The words hung heavy in the hot air. For the first time in years, Samuel Briggs felt something building inside his chest, a storm he thought had long passed. He didn't know who had done this to her, but he knew one thing for sure. If the devil had a face in Red Hollow, he planned to meet it head-on. The question that burned in his mind was simple. Could a man who had once lost everything save someone this time before it was too late? The sun was setting when Samuel stepped out onto the porch. The sky burned orange, the color of old wounds. Inside, Leah was asleep at last, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Samuel watched the horizon quietly, the way a man watches a storm roll in. For years, he had chosen silence. No visitors, no friends, no trouble. But tonight, trouble had walked right through his door and bled on his floor. And somehow it felt like it belonged there. He went back inside. The floorboards creaked and Leah stirred at the sound. Her voice was soft and rough. "I didn't mean to cause you any harm." Samuel shook his head. "You didn't." He sat down across from her, poured 2 cups of coffee, and slid one across the table. Steam rose between them like a fragile peace offering. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Leah hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the cup, her knuckles white. "The mayor's sons," she whispered. "They said my daddy owed them money. But he's been gone near a month." The fever took him. "They came anyway." Samuel's jaw tightened. He had seen their kind before. Men who thought money made them untouchable. Men who believed pain was theirs to give. He leaned back, taking a long, steady breath. "Those boys ever pay for what they do?" Leah gave a bitter laugh. "In this town, they don't pay for anything." Samuel stared into the fire, the flickering light dancing across his face. Something hard settled in his chest again. He remembered the soldiers. He remembered Mary. And he remembered doing nothing. That was the part that still burned. He stood up slow, like a man making peace with a bad decision. "You can stay here for now," he said. Lia's eyes widened. "You're not afraid they'll come?" Samuel looked toward the door. "They can come if they want." Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of something unspoken. Maybe hope, maybe anger wearing a different face. Lia set her cup down and met his eyes. "I don't want to hide forever." Samuel nodded. "You won't." He turned to hang his rifle back on the wall, but his hands hesitated. Then he changed his mind and set it on the table instead. The old iron looked right at home there, waiting. Outside, coyotes howled somewhere deep in the valley. Inside, Samuel Briggs felt something he hadn't felt in 20 years. Purpose. He knew this wasn't just about one girl anymore. Red Hollow had been rotten for a long time, and someone had to clean it up. He blew out the lantern, leaving only the glow of the dying fire. And in that quiet room, with a wounded girl and a loaded rifle, he whispered to himself, "If they come for her, they'll have to go through me first." But Samuel didn't know the riders were already on their way. At first the sound came slow, hoofbeats, faint and steady, growing closer. Samuel knew that sound too well. He had heard it many times before, back when trouble wore spurs and smiles. He stepped to the window and looked out across the open plain. Dust was rising. 6 riders, heading straight toward the house. He didn't need to count twice. 3 of them were the mayor's sons. The other 3 were hired guns. Lia came down the stairs, her hair loose, eyes wide. "They found me," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Samuel nodded once, calm but cold. "Upstairs, loft above my room. Don't make a sound," she hesitated. "Samuel, please don't do something stupid." He gave a half smile. Too late for that. When she disappeared into the loft, Samuel checked his rifle. It still smelled of oil and old battles. He walked out onto the porch, the sun cutting sharp across his face. The riders slowed to a halt about 20 feet away. Their leader, Thomas Berkeley, the oldest son, gave a fake smile. "Afternoon, Mr. Briggs. Heard a young lady came by your way. Goes by Lia Jennings." Samuel leaned against the porch post, rifle in hand but low. "Haven't seen no young lady." "Why?" Thomas grinned. "She stole from the bank." "Daddy wants his money back." Samuel let out a dry chuckle. "Funny. I didn't know the Jennings girl worked at a bank." That wiped the smile off Thomas's face. The sheriff spat in the dust. "Mind if we look around?" Samuel straightened, his shadow long across the dirt. "You got a warrant?" The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Don't need one if you've got nothing to hide." Samuel looked down at his boots, then back up, steady. "Funny thing about the law out here. A man's land is his castle. And uninvited guests? Well, they ain't welcome." For a long second, no one moved. The wind carried the smell of sweat and gunpowder waiting to happen. Then Thomas tugged his reins and turned his horse around. "We'll be back, old man." Samuel nodded slowly. "I'll be right here." When the dust settled, he went back inside. Lia sat on the edge of the bed, tears in her eyes. "They called me a thief," she said. "My father was the most honest man in Red Hollow." Samuel sat across from her, his voice soft. "They're scared. Scared of losing the power their money bought them. But fear makes men stupid, and stupid men make mistakes." He poured her a glass of water. Outside, thunder rolled far in the distance. It wasn't rain. It was the sound of war coming to Red Hollow. Samuel leaned back in his chair, eyes on the storm clouds gathering over the hills. "So," he said quietly, "tell me something, partner. If you were me, would you stay and fight, or pack your bags and run?" The wind moaned through the cracks in the cabin walls. "Take a sip of your coffee," he muttered, almost to himself. "Think about it." Hours passed. The storm finally broke that night. Wind howled through the valley, carrying the smell of rain and gun oil. Lia couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching lightning split the sky. Every flash lit the fear in her eyes. Samuel was still awake too, sitting by the fire, cleaning his rifle the way some men say their prayers. When she came down the stairs, he didn't look up. "Can't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Been thinking." He poured her a cup of coffee, strong, bitter, and far too late for it. But it gave them something to hold on to. "They'll come back," she said. "You know that, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, I know." Lia leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "What if we didn't wait? What if we went to them?" That made him look up. "To them?" She took a breath. "The bank. Every deal, every fake loan, every name. It's all written down somewhere. If we can get proof, we can end this. Samuel frowned. You're talking about breaking into a bank. That's a hanging offense. So is what they did to me, she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but her words cut deep. Samuel met her eyes. They weren't filled with fear anymore. They were filled with fire. He leaned back, thinking, Old man Berkeley's too cheap to fix that back window, he said slowly. Always said no one's dumb enough to crawl through broken glass. Laya smiled for the first time in days. Guess he never met us. By midnight, they were in town. The rain had turned the dirt streets into rivers of mud. The bank stood dark and silent, like every secret it kept. They moved like shadows. Samuel went first, boots sinking softly in the wet ground. Laya found the broken window. Her hand shook as she pulled herself through, but she didn't stop. Inside, the air was thick and stale. Samuel followed close behind with a lantern. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Laya went straight to the filing drawers. Her fingers moved fast, steady, like someone who had spent too many nights organizing her father's store ledgers. Here, she whispered. Samuel brought the light closer. Rows of names. Women who'd paid debts that didn't exist. False signatures. Money moved through fake accounts. The list went on and on. This ain't just a few bad apples, Samuel muttered. This is a whole damn orchard. Laya kept copying names, her handwriting quick but clean. Outside, thunder rolled again. Closer this time. They were almost done when Samuel froze. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from the front door. He blew out the lantern and grabbed Laya's hand. Voices echoed through the darkness. Check the back. I saw light. Samuel's heart pounded. He pressed a finger to his lips. Laya nodded, clutching the papers tight to her chest. Then came a voice. Deep, cold, and familiar. Well, what do we got here? Samuel knew that voice. The sheriff. He tightened his grip on the rifle. There'd be no talking their way out this time. The next 5 seconds would decide whether they'd live long enough to see the sunrise. The first light came slow over Red Hollow. Smoke still rose from what used to be the town bank. The fire from the night before had burned through the roof, leaving only black bones and silence behind. It took days for the smoke to clear, and even longer for the truth to reach Denver. But when it did, the law came riding fast, like thunder rolling down the plains. Samuel and Laya stood on the hill above town, watching the riders come in. This time they weren't the sheriff's men. These were federal marshals sent from Denver. By noon, half the town was in chains. The mayor's sons, the sheriff, and every man tied to that rotten tree of corruption. When the noise settled, Samuel looked at Laya. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. She had been through hell, but somehow she had come out stronger. Your father would have been proud, he said. She nodded, eyes glistening in the morning sun. A few weeks later, Laya stood in front of the old general store that once belonged to her family. The government had returned it to her, and given her more than she ever expected. Samuel came by, hat in hand. You could rebuild this place, he said. Make it bigger than before. Laya smiled softly. I could. Or maybe I'll use it to help others who lost everything too. He smiled back, quiet, proud, the kind of pride that doesn't need words. As they stood there, a warm summer wind swept through the street, carrying the dust of a new beginning. People in Red Hollow still talk about that night. Some call it justice. Others call it fate. But the truth is simpler. It was a choice made by two people who refused to stay silent, because sometimes it only takes one person brave enough to stand up for others to find their voice. And sometimes that one act of courage can change an entire town. So tell me something. If you were Samuel Briggs, would you have done the same? Would you risk everything to protect someone the world had already turned its back on? Take a sip of your drink, lean back, and think about it. And if this story touched you, even just a little, hit that like button. It helps more than you think. Then tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'd love to know. Before I end this video, I just want to speak from the heart. Thank you, every single one of you, for supporting this channel, for watching these stories, and for leaving kind comments. I've read many of them. Some of you watch late at night, and I truly appreciate that. But please, take care of yourselves. These stories are meant for comfort and reflection, not to keep you from sleep. If it's late where you are, maybe it's time to close your eyes and rest. I also want to say I'm sorry if I can't reply to everyone. Truth is, I'm not as young as I used to be. After long hours of editing these videos, I often feel tired. That's why I try to take better care of my health. And in doing so, I've learned to care more deeply for all of you too. So thank you truly for being part of this small corner of peace we've built together. Take care of yourselves, get some rest, and may tomorrow bring you calm skies.